am super excited to share again with you guys this year on my favorite character as well, and that's Elijah. Last year I was able to speak on Elijah, actually the chapter after the one we're on today. So I'm excited to be able to share with you. As I'm up here worshiping and being part of the worship band, it's so much fun just being a part of that. But when you're up front and you hear the voices just coming this way, it is intense. It is just like heaven, being up here and hearing that, and I appreciate that. And I thank you guys for being so engaged in worship. That is so impactful to everyone around you. So thanks for doing that, being a part of it. This is a great week of hearing these amazing stories, true stories from the Old Testament of these heroes of faith. And I've appreciated hearing them so far, and the other stories being shared. I'd like what Rick was sharing as well. I know he gave you some spoilers on Star Wars. I'm not going to give you more Star Wars spoilers today, but I do remember seeing my first Star Wars movie. And since I'm a little bit older than Rick, the first Star Wars movie I saw was actually in 1977. That was the first Star Wars movie that came out. And I remember because I was only 4 years old, and you don't remember a lot of things under 5, but this is one thing I do remember. I remember going to the actual drive-in movie theater in some city in Illinois with my family in the back of a station wagon to watch Star Wars. But what I remember the movie is the opening scene where, okay, here's the only spoiler if you haven't seen this one. The opening scene where the stormtroopers are coming in and they're having this fight with the rebel forces. I remember that part. And then all I remember after that is me and my 2 brothers fighting in the back seat for the rest of the 2 hours. And my dad's hand just coming back trying to grab us and get us to stop fighting. So I grew up with 2 brothers. One 2 years older, one 2 years younger. How many other middle children are in this room? Awesome. I feel your pain. I'm with you. Being 2 years on either side, having 3 guys like that just growing up, oh man, we got into some, I would just call it creative stuff growing up. My poor mom had to go through quite a bit. And as we grew up doing some crazy stuff and some creative things, it was fun. And it went on for quite a bit of time. I'm going to share with one story. Now that I'm 46, the statute of limitations has passed. It's the period of time you can still get in trouble for something. So I can share this story. And this is actually a story that's going to tie in with the lesson today, but it's a story actually in college. I went to college at Cincinnati Christian University, and my older brother, two-year older brother, also was at that college. We were actually roommates my freshman year. And he got a job at a hotel in Cincinnati. The building is still there. I think the name has changed several times, but this hotel is on right off of I-75, right by the 275-75 intersection in Sharonville. There's this 12-story hotel there, and I don't remember what it was called at that time, but he and his friend had a job working there as bellhops, which is the guys who would haul the luggage for people or just take care of errands around the hotel and stuff. So one night he calls me up. I'm at the dorm, and he's at work, and he calls me up and says, Todd, you and Justin, a good friend of mine, you guys got to get up here. You got to get up to the hotel tonight and wear pants. I'm like, wear pants? Do I normally go places without having pants? They're like, no, don't wear shorts. You got to wear pants. Meet us at the hotel. We're like, okay, this sounds like fun. So we drive up to Sharonville and we meet them at the hotel, and they're in their awesome little bellhop outfits. And they take us up to the 12th floor and says, we found on our keys, we have the key to the maid's closets. And inside the maid's closet, there's a laundry chute in this hotel that goes all the way down from the 12th floor to the basement. You gotta check this thing out. We've been trying this thing out. It's awesome. You guys gotta try this. Like, okay, that sounds like fun. So inside the maid's closet, there's this little hatch that opens up. It goes into this laundry chute. And the laundry chute's about maybe 2.5 foot wide. It's just this metal tube. And it's not like a slide. It's actually a chute that just goes straight down. All 12 stories, into the basement, comes out on the ceiling in the basement where they catch the laundry. He said, what you do, you got to get in this thing, and you just put your back against one edge of the wall, and you put your knees against the other, and then you can just completely control your descent. If you want to go fast, you want to go slow, however you want to just come right down that laundry chute. Like, all right, we'll give this a try. So my friend, I get in first. I go down just a little bit, and I find like, oh, this is actually pretty comfortable because you just have complete control of it. And then my friend gets in, and he closes that hatch, and it's actually pitch black inside the thing because they don't put lights in the laundry chute. So it's probably a good thing because if you look down, I mean, the 12 stories, that's 120 feet. That's about 3 times the height of the high ropes course over there is just straight down. So I slide down a little bit, and my friend starts to slide, but instead of using his knees, he's also using his shoes, and it's like screeching really loud. And I'm like, you gotta stop doing that, you gotta stop doing that, because I can't imagine like someone being in their hotel room, and they're just sitting there, and the other side of the wall, you just hear the just coming down the wall behind them, and like, what is that? And we're gonna call the front desk, and SWAT's gonna arrive, and like, what's in the laundry chute? And we just start this descent. And the only way you can, because it's pitch black, the only way you can tell where you are is by reaching out and just counting the hatches as you're just kind of come down. We were not sliding fast because that was too terrifying. We're just gonna make our way down this laundry chute. So I'm reaching out and I'm touching the latches to count them so I know what floor we're on. And when I reach out in the dark and I hit this one, smack it, and just moments after I smacked it, I can see a light comes on in the room. Because I can see the light just coming around the perimeter of that hatch. And I'm just frozen at that moment. And my face is about the level of that hatch. And then I see this light come from below me, and I look down, and it's my brother, my older brother. He's sticking his head like through the second floor, whispering up, "Guys, be quiet. Be really quiet. There's a maid having to get something out of the closet up there." I'm like, I know, it's right here. Then I'm just frozen there, and I'm thinking, man, what am I going to do? What am I, I've got about, it was the 8th floor, and like we got 80 feet of nothing below me. I've got about 3 feet away from this maid that's gonna freak out if she opens up this hatch, and my face is right there. What in the world am I gonna do? What am I gonna say? Like, hey, it's going down. Hey, you want me to take that? I'm on my way down anyway. Or maybe ask, would you like this ironed? I mean, I don't know, what would you do? And I'm just thinking, oh man, I'm just gonna freeze, and maybe it's like a T-Rex, you won't see me. And just stay right here. And after just a few moments, the light goes off. Maid leaves her, did not stick anything down the chute, which I'm also thankful for, because a pot of laundry would have probably done me in. And we continue our slide down, and my friends screech down the laundry chute to the bottom, and we hop out at the bottom. And as you get out in the laundry room there, coming out in the basement, the room right next to the laundry room is the security room, with the guy sitting there watching the cameras. There's no cameras in the laundry chute, thankfully. So we're feeling all bold about ourselves and everything. Yeah, we just did this. And then we found out that my brother and his friend had actually gotten the entire staff of the hotel to slide down the laundry chute. Until the point that the manager took that key off the rings of the bellhops. And only the maids had keys to the laundry chute rooms after that point. We were thinking, oh man, this is so fun, this is so bold. And so exciting. So I can share that story now because I can't get in trouble for it. But the hotel is still there, and I drive into Cincinnati, I see it all the time. It's like, yeah, I rode in that laundry chute in that building. And when we look at this story in Elijah, this is an awesome story because this prophet of God is bold just right out of the gate. He doesn't have to be convinced to do awesome things for God. He's just born for this. And he is excited about what he does, and he exhibits what bold faith really looks like. Now, sometimes we think we're being bold, and actually we're just being reckless. I mean, my story is more about being reckless than being bold. When it comes to faith, it's also, sometimes we need to be bold, and sometimes we just become reckless. So I'm going to identify what those two things look like. Use this definition. To be bold means to do something specifically to accomplish a purpose and a mission, no matter what the risk. To do something to accomplish a purpose or a mission that is bigger than you, no matter what the risk. To be reckless is just to do something to do it, no matter what, not caring about the risk, just for the outcome. So our story of Elijah, as we look at this, is an amazing story of someone who has incredible bold faith. And I think from the story, I'm going to let the story really teach itself, because there's a lot in there that teaches us what bold faith looks like. And many of you have heard this story many times before, and you read it again this morning. I'm glad you went through it. Some of you might be the first time you've seen the story. But I'm hoping that you'll see some stuff in it that maybe you didn't catch before. And I'll say that phrase a couple times, like, don't miss this. Don't miss this. Don't just read over this part here. Don't miss this. Every time I read it, in fact, even preparing for this lesson, and I've taught on this lesson many times before, new things were popping out to me. So I'm praying that'll be the experience for you as well, as we consider what it really means to have bold faith. Let me give you the setting, so we know where we're at in the story, and we know what this is really about. In the book of 1 Kings, in this time in Israel's history, there are kings that are in charge, and this is after there's a tiff within the kingdom, and there's actually a divided kingdom. And in the northern kingdom of Israel, we have King Ahab, who is in charge. And a little bit about King Ahab. Looking back in chapter 16, actually of 1 Kings, it says, "But Ahab did what was evil in the Lord's sight, even more than any of the kings before him." So he was an absolutely evil and corrupt king leading God's people, doing the opposite of what he should be doing. And I love what it says next. It says, "And if it were not enough to follow the example of Jeroboam, who was an evil king before him," which he is worse than him, "he married Jezebel." There's just an absolute burn on Jezebel right there. It wasn't bad enough that he's the worst king ever. He went and married her. Jezebel is a foreigner. And God did give instruction to his people to not marry the foreigners. And it wasn't because of some racist thing. It was because God needed his people protected. And he knew that the foreign people would bring in other gods. And that's exactly what Jezebel did. When he married Jezebel and didn't do what God instructed to, Jezebel brought with her false prophets and these false gods. Actually, we have two different false gods going on in the story. We have Baal and we have Asherah. And we have these prophets that she's pretty much financing them to do the work while she's hunting down God's prophets and killing them. She is absolutely wicked. And her husband, the king, is absolutely awful. So there's the setting that we find Elijah in, our prophet. And a prophet is someone in the Old Testament who is called out by God to speak for him to other people. So we have the prophet, we have the king, and we have the wicked wife. That's the setting, what we've got going on here. In the northern kingdom of Israel, the first piece I see in this story is that bold faith calls us to do hard things. I mean, it's simple, but it's right there. Bold faith calls us to do hard things, even if we have to do it alone. And that's where Elijah finds himself. Before we get into chapter 18, just to help with the setting here, the beginning of chapter 17 gives the account of what Elijah had his confrontation first with King Ahab. In verse 1 of chapter 17, Elijah goes out to King Ahab and he tells him, he gives him this proclamation from God. He says, "Surely as the Lord, the God of Israel lives, the God I serve, there will be no dew or rain during the next few years until I give word." We could use Elijah this week here at camp. No rain, no dew. But imagine that. Not just no rain, but actually having no dew on the grass in the morning. It's going to be completely dry. And not just for a week, not a month, but for the next few years until I give word. That is pretty confrontational. That is incredibly bold. And that is approaching a king who hates God's people and whose wife hates God's people even more to give him this message. And it's a message that God is using trying to wake up King Ahab and the people and the Israelites to get their attention. He's going to take away the water. He's going to take away the rain. And because this is such an unpopular thing, especially with Jezebel, God kind of puts Ahab into protective custody. He hides him. And during this time of hiding, some time passes, and then God calls Elijah to come back and confront Ahab once again. And that is where our story picks up in chapter 18. In verse 17 of chapter 18 of 1 Kings. When Ahab saw him, that's Elijah, he exclaimed, "So is it really you troublemaker of Israel?" And Elijah says, "I've made no trouble for Israel. You and your family are the troublemakers. For you have refused to obey the commands of the Lord and have worshipped the images of Baal instead. Now summon all Israel to join me at Mount Carmel, along with 450 prophets of Baal and 400 prophets of Asherah, who were supported by Jezebel." Sometimes we look at the story, we just think of the 450 prophets of Baal. There's 400 prophets of Asherah in this as well. So there's 850 prophets of false gods versus one. Bold faith calls us to do hard things, and sometimes they have to go do it alone. That's where Elijah's at. So, here it is, verse 20.
So Ahab summoned all the people of Israel, the prophets, to Mount Carmel, and Elijah stood in front of them and said, how much longer... Let me just back up here. Don't miss, it's not just the prophets, it's the people of Israel that are showing up in this mountain. It's God's people. People are supposed to be God's people. People that are supposed to be serving and worshiping God. And this is who Elijah is talking to here in these sentences. It says, how much longer will you waver, hobbling between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, then follow him. That's the charge he does going alone to God's people. Saying, if these false gods are God, then follow them. But if God, the Lord your God is God, follow them. Follow him. And what happens is just actually heartbreaking. In that next phrase, at the end of verse 21, I got it underlined and marked. It says, but the people were completely silent. Just be silent. I don't want you to answer me. No matter what I ask for now, I don't want you to answer me, but it was like this. Don't answer me. Do you believe in God? Will you follow God? Will you trust God? And it's absolutely silent. That's not what you expect here at camp. We want to cry out. We want to say, yes, I want to follow God. But it's absolutely silent. That had to be heartbreaking to God. And even more heartbreaking to Elijah, the prophet of God, that God's own people won't even speak up. They won't even say a maybe. They're just completely silent. And it's powerful. Don't miss that. So Elijah says, I'm the only prophet of the Lord who is left, but Baal has 450 prophets. Now bring 2 bulls. He comes up with this idea. Now bring 2 bulls. The prophets of Baal may choose whichever one they choose and cut it into pieces, lay it on the wood of the altar without setting fire to it. And I'll prepare the other bull and lay it on the wood of the altar, but not set fire to it. Then call on the name of your God, and I will call on the name of the Lord. The God who answers by setting fire to the wood is the true God! Exclamation point. And all the people agree. They're like, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. They're happy about this idea. The prophets Baal, the prophets Asherah, even God's people, they're all happy. The only 2 people that aren't happy, or the 2 things that aren't happy, the 2 bulls. Because they're marching them in there to create these 2 altars. Like, yeah, this is a great idea. This would be a great showdown to try to prove something here. The second point of bold faith that I see in this, and it comes in these next verses, is that bold faith has confidence because of who God is. Not because of who we are, but bold faith has confidence because of who God is. And I see that because Elijah lets them go first. He could have just got this over with real quick. Like, build the altar, pray, fire comes down, this is over. But he lets them go first. That's somewhat challenging. Are you threatened sometimes, and you maybe get a chance to discuss this in your huddle groups, by opposing faiths or religions? That you don't even want to hear it out? Does it intimidate? Does it scare you in some ways? Elijah isn't even intimidated because he's so confident in who his God is that he lets them go first and try this first. And not only let them go first and try this first, as we read later on, and we mentioned it a few times, by noon, when there's no answer, there's no reply, there's no response from the false god, that he starts to mock them and start to say, hey, yell louder. In verse 27, yell louder, for surely he is a god. Perhaps he is daydreaming or is relieving himself. That's the New Living Translation. Some other Bibles have softened that. He's doing business. It says that. But maybe he's relieving himself, making fun of them. So maybe he's going to the bathroom, or maybe he's on a trip. Or he's asleep and he needs to be awakened. He is so confident in his God, he's not worried that some spark is going to light on that fire. And what's also crazy is how far the people, and we're talking about the prophets of Baal, the prophets of Asherah, and probably the Israelite people as well, dancing around this altar expecting something to happen. So crazy that they begin to cut themselves, as the next verses describe, cut themselves where blood is flowing. And it makes me ask the question, how much does it take for you to follow such a bad idea and such a ridiculous thing that you start to harm yourself? Really not much. That's where these people are. The people of God who are supposed to be worshiping God are harming themselves trying to worship the wrong thing. Man, that connects, I think, with me and all of us. We harm ourselves as we're trying to worship the wrong thing. But Elijah is confident in his faith. He has bold faith, not because of the confidence in himself, but because of the faith that because of the God that his faith represents. He is confident enough in his God to not worry that something might go wrong and this whole example is going to fail on him. No, he lets this go on all day long until the evening. And then he makes a little object lesson. And this is where the third point, and this is a point that was kind of a new point to me looking at the story. See, this story is not really about a confrontation with the false prophets. If you look through it all, the people of Israel are listed first in all this. The people of Israel and the false prophets. The people of Israel are called to the mountain and the false prophets. This is actually a confrontation with God's people to wake them up. Because in the next verses, he takes time to rebuild his altar, using 12 stones to remind them of the 12 tribes. And to create that. And then to prove that there is no tricks up his sleeve here, and there's nothing about Elijah that's powerful in this. There's nothing that Elijah is going to be able to do to make this happen. He has them douse it with water. Once, twice, 3 times. Douse it with water. It is absolutely saturated. And it's going to be hard for fire to take off like that. He douses it with that water. And then we really see the key to this whole story. In verse 37... Actually, I'll back up to 36, just kind of leading into this. The key to this whole story, that bold faith is really for the benefit of other people in this. At the usual time for offering the evening sacrifice, Elijah the prophet walked up to the altar and prayed, O Lord, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, prove today that you are God in Israel and that I am your servant. Prove that I have done all this at your command. And then this powerful sentence in verse 37. Don't miss it. O Lord, answer me. Answer me so these people will know that you, O Lord, are God, and that you have brought them back to yourself. He's talking about God's people. Answer him so that they will be brought back to God. See, the confrontation wasn't to try to prove that these gods are false as much. Was it to prove to God's people that God's power is real? They had forgotten it. They had forgotten it, and it was causing them harm, and it was causing them trouble, and it was causing them to be outside of God's will. And Elijah's bold faith was to, remind them that God's power is much stronger. Let me say it maybe in this way. A lot of times we get mixed up thinking that we have to beat a certain kind of evil, that we have to beat this sin. Guys, sin has already been beaten. Evil has already been beaten. We're not called to this bold faith so that we can have this victorious thing or saying, hey, we took down this evil. That evil's already been taken down. We're called to bold faith to be reminded of the power of God. That power that is shown in this story right here. Power that fire can come down and not just burn wood, but can burn water. It can burn the dirt that's there, the rocks and the dirt, and can just change what's happening there. We are called to bold faith to be reminded of the power of God. Sometimes we come to these mountaintop experiences like camp so we can beat this sin or take care of this one issue in our life. But don't go out and live out the rest of the year living in the power of God. You know what happens? It just gets replaced with a different sin. It just gets replaced with a different kind of evil. I mean, Elijah could have gone in here and just wiped out these prophets. It's like, yeah, great victory. But then it just would have been some other false prophets. Some other false god would have popped up, and Israel would have continued to follow them. But the impact that took place here from him having that kind of bold faith that's really for the benefit of other people, we see that towards the end of the story, in verse 39, and when all the people were talking about the Israelite people and even the prophets of false gods, when all the people saw it, they fell face down on the ground and cried out, The Lord, He is God. The Lord, He is God! Exclamation point. They're reminded of the power of God. And that was the point, not to have some great victory over these false prophets. Yeah, victory came over them. In fact, the next verse, they go out and they slaughter the rest of them. Doesn't make Jezebel happy, but is what God's judgment was coming to them at that point. The power of God is reminded in the hearts and the minds of the Israelite people. And that is what Elijah wanted to accomplish in this, through an amazing confidence in God. And just in closing, because what I want you guys to do in the huddle groups is dig into this, look at some of the risks that were behind this, and how do you respond in faith when it comes to risk, and sticking with the 1 Kings chapter 18 and that. I love how this next section just starts off. You know, Elijah started this whole thing by telling King Ahab there's not going to be any rain. And actually 3 years has passed from the time he told him that. 3 years without rain or dew. And then this story takes place. And then Elijah knows that rain is coming again. And he's so confident in God. I love what he says. It's verse 41. After all this took place, then Elijah said to Ahab, "Go get something to eat and drink, for I hear a mighty rainstorm coming." He's like, go get your popcorn, get a lawn chair, sit out. This is going to be awesome. There's going to be a storm coming. It's awesome. Watch the storm fronts come in. But after 3 years of not even seeing any rain or storm, he's like, get ready. God's ready to do something else here. Pretty amazing. And then he goes and prays, and rain comes back to the land. Absolute confidence in who God is. Not in how mighty he can be, that Elijah can be, but in how mighty God is. That's what we're called to, guys, in being on both faith. Some of you look at these stories and like, man, I can't be like that person, and I can't be like this person or whatever else. God is calling you to just accept the power of Jesus Christ. Not try to be the superhero, as we're talking about these heroes of faith. What makes you superhero that way is being empowered by God. So I pray that continues just to dwell in your hearts and minds today as we go through this, we go into huddle groups and everything else, that you will be challenged to have bold faith. Let's pray. God, I thank you for this morning. I thank you for bringing out the sunshine, stopping the rain. For the opportunities we have this week to just continue to draw closer to you, to see these stories of the Old Testament, sometimes in even new ways. And then we can be taught through that. God, I pray that today is just especially blessed by you. I know we're tired. It's Thursday. But give us that energy we need to hear your Spirit, and that we're responsive to the guiding and the leading of your Spirit. And as we have this mountaintop experience this week and seeing what you're doing, that we leave from here with the confidence in knowing your power, the power of your Spirit that stays with us all year long, that we won't forget the people that you called us to be. In the name of Jesus I pray. Amen.
Amen.